Hello, everybody, and well, how are you, Barry?
Okay.
And here we are talking about the system again, and just to
Yeah.
move on from the last couple of podcasts that we did. Really, today we're looking at why does the system fail ordinary people, and then why does it seem to work so well for a tiny few? So we're going to break that down today, and if you don't mind, I'm going to ask you a few questions. Just go with the flow, Barry, if you can answer. We'll keep it short and simple for people. But the first
Yeah.
question really is like, and we have talked about it in the former podcast, what is poverty? And we're saying that everybody's talking about poverty or people are willing to talk about, but what does it actually mean again? Sort of kind of like a recap of
Well,
our
that's
last.
I suppose that's what talking about all where poverty comes from and the fact of inequality and exploitation are central tenets of why poverty happens. But I mean, the underlying major thing is the system that we live in. And by talking about inequality or exploitation, we know that exists, but it doesn't tell us where that comes from. And it doesn't tell us why millions of people are, even though they're working full time, they're still struggling to pay bills, or why some people have more wealth than others and so much wealth that they don't have to consider really anything at all, while others can't even afford to pay their rent or buy food. So I suppose to understand poverty, we have to look beyond those symptoms of exploitation and inequality and look at the system that sort of creates all that.
And we were talking about this system, and I think we have a tendency, I know I do it myself, to talk about the system, but that can be an obscure word. Or a lot of people talk about this system, but what is the actual system we're talking about here?
Well, the system is the system that we have been living under for about 200 years or 250, nearly 300 years, and it's called capitalism. And that's what it's called. Now, there's various different types of capitalism, but basically it's the system that we live under. And sadly, the word rarely ever gets mentioned during education, on the media or in school or in politics. It's very seldom, that word is very seldom ever mentioned. You don't hear it in our daily lives hardly at all. Like they'll talk about the business program and they'll do a business article in the papers and stuff, but they never mention the word capitalism. That's what they're actually talking about, but they never say that. It seems to be one of these kind of secret words that they want to keep hidden. And in fact, quite often, when you mention the word capitalism, people kind of sort of look around them to see is there anybody listening. They're a wee bit afraid of it. I don't know. I don't know
Yeah.
why that is. Like I mean, it's just a name of the system. Just like feudalism was before that, and we came from feudalism into capitalism, and slavery was the thing before that. So the other thing is that people think that the capitalism, that this is the way things always been, and that's not the case. I mean, we've had other types of systems beforehand, namely slavery and feudalism and other minor systems in between, and now we're at the stage of capitalism. So that's it as far as.
Yeah, even when you say we've had slavery, like I'm just triggered by that word because I know in our previous conversations we talked about wage slavery, like to not see
Yeah.
ourselves really confronting this reality that we are still slaves chained to a system.
Yeah, well, that's right. And I mean, wage slavery is slavery. And I mean, at some point, we'll get into explaining exactly why that is the case. But most people don't see slavery as, when we talk about slavery, we're talking about people being kidnapped from other countries and maybe kidnapped from different areas and made to force to work by masters and by brutality. The present system, while slavery is an element of it, the present system is to a greater or lesser extent seen as not correct either, voluntary in a way, and you're not indentured as such, give or take, but in fact you are. However, it's a different system.
So, like when we were talking about capitalism there, and you mentioned feudalism as well, what makes capitalism different from the earlier systems?
The thing about capitalism is that the largest majority, the majority of people in the world, in fact, don't own what they need. In other words, they can't grow their own crops, they can't make their own clothes, they can't have their own food, they can't organize their own shelter really to a greater lesser extent. And what they do, they have to buy all that in. So what they do is they sell their labour for wages to get money to buy food, to get money to pay the rent, to get money to buy clothes. That's the way it is. They depend completely on the market. Two markets actually. They depend on the market of goods and services where it's at, and they also depend on the labour market where it's at, up or down. So the working people in particular are assailed from all sides. I mean, to not make it complicated, simply put, and people will understand this: if you don't work, you can't pay the bills.
So, I mean, that's what sets capitalism apart, really, that workers have to depend completely on the market to survive. Is that not just like how jobs work? Why is that considered such a problem per se?
Well, I mean, this gets to the heart of the matter, really, because when you work and produce stuff, say in a factory or even in a services, you're not rewarded for everything that you produce. You only get a part of it. So, for example, if you work a 5-day week, by Wednesday of that week, or certainly even maybe by Tuesday of that week, you've actually earned enough to pay your wages for the whole of the week, plus all the expenses that you cost the employer. So the rest of the week, the 3 days, shall we say, whatever you create in them 3 days goes completely free as profit to your employer. So there's a gap here, and that's where wealth comes from. That's where profit comes from. It comes from the 3 days that you have worked for free. Free. When I say free, I mean that the employer is getting not charged any cost for that because you've already made enough in the first 2 days of the week. Sometimes it's a bit difficult to get it explained or get it into your head, but that's how the system works, and that's how businesses make money.
Yeah. But like, say, for example, and I don't mean to be playing devil's advocate, but a lot of people say, look, we need competition. We need innovation. And don't these conditions help to create, they help workers as well. So competition, innovation is important, and they actually help workers. So what do we say to that?
Well, not really, because the thing of it is that, the competition between traders is one thing, but then as a consequence of that, there's also competition then between workers in relation to the value of wages. So, and companies, that competition that's in the market, that causes companies to cut costs. They have to cut costs to stay afloat, to stay where they are and make a profit. So the profit, when business do well, profits goes up. But that doesn't mean that you as a worker are going to get more money into your pocket. In fact, it seldom does. And it usually means...
Or better conditions either.
Or better conditions. In fact, it usually means that businesses have to up the ante, work faster, harder, longer hours. And also, I mean, it affects job security. So there's less job security, in fact.
And can we just say, is it reductionist to say, oh, this is just because all bosses and CEOs are greedy?
Well, that's easy to say, you know what I mean? It's like blaming migrants for taking people's jobs, which is not the case at all. But it's deeper than that. It's not just about individual greed, and no doubt there's an element of that. Clearly, there is an element of that. That comes with the territory. But the thing of it is that it's the system, the capitalist system, that the survival in the market, and the businesses are on a treadmill. I mean, if they don't perform, then they go. And if a company doesn't cut costs, it loses customers. And if it loses customers, it loses profits. And if it loses profits, then it's going to be swallowed up by the competition. So even, nice business owners feel forced to pay as little as they can and demand as much from the workers. I mean, it's not possible. It's the logic of the system, in fact, and that's it.
And also, it's not personal. It's the
logic. Oh no, it's not personal either. I mean,
the logic of the system. Nobody ever talks about that. That this is the logical outcome to a system that is designed in this way.
Yeah.
So, overall, who owns what? Who creates the wealth? Give us the bottom line, Barry.
Well, I mean, it's the minority. It's a tiny group of people, landlords and CEOs and shareholders who own things and that we all depend on for housing and transport and energy and food, or you name it, whatever you need. The vast majority of people, the workers, nurses and builders and doctors and drivers and factory workers and whatever, well, that's it. They create all the wealth. but we'll have to know who pockets it, who gets it, who reaps the profits. That's how the system works. That's the way it's guided. That's the way it's governed.
And it's not the ones doing the work. So,
No, definitely not. No.
no, and it obviously wasn't always this way.
Well, no, it wasn't. But I mean, again, if you go back to feudalism and slavery, there's obviously inequality and exploitation there too. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a different form of exploitation, but exploitation nonetheless. That's sort of how you're left with it. To get around this, the only hope is to change completely the system that we live under, to end the system of capitalism and bring a new system to the fore. And that system exists. That system is called socialism. But, that's something maybe we might talk about in a later podcast. We probably can do more areas of what capitalism is, because people sort of think that capitalism is some kind of fixed entity that was always there and always will be there and that never going to change the system we live under. But that's not true. It is changeable.
Mm-hmm. And what about when people look to the government and say the government is supposed to step in to make things fairer? How do people still think that? Let's ask for things.
Well, I mean,
how is the government still getting away with it?
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing of it is that people still think that the government have their interests, that the governments are for the people, because I mean they say all the time, like, we're elected by you, so we'll do what you want. But I mean that's not true either, because I mean at the end of the day, governments are governed by the money that these people bring into the country and create jobs. And even though it's the profits from our labour, they use them profits to build up yet a bigger company and create more jobs. So the governments will say then, this company's creating work here. So at the end of the day, the government has a vested interest in the system continuing. And sure, their attitude is, what are you complaining about? You have a job and you're getting the best wage and you're getting the highest wage and you're getting the highest wage payable and whatever else. So they're not honest brokers. They can't be honest brokers.
No. Well, I suppose their job is, even if they did want to help, they're inside the system, and the system's designed to prioritise the corporate power over the people. So they might placate some sectors of society or some workers from time to time, just to keep us less angry, to normalise the system. That's why sometimes you get a wee bit of a pay increase, but it's still and people are delighted about it. So that's that kind of pacification to curtail rather the anger. And then if you're just, I'm going to keep going on if you have time. Is that all right?
Yeah.
I was just going to look at how actually competition affects workers, but I know you've sort of talked about that. But what about the pressure that comes from workers with fewer breaks, more overtime, this burnout, job insecurity? Do you see that as part of the competition that's affecting workers as well?
Well, I mean, that is driven by the market again. I mean, the market is the key part of all of this, and the company's ability to perform within that market. And if they can't perform within the market, the very first place, as I said earlier, they're going to look at is the workers. How can we make the workers work harder, longer, or indeed in some cases work less? Because now you have the situation where people are on call, the so-called zero contract work, and they come in when they're needed. It means then in turn that they really can't plan their lives at all. So that brings its own stress.
On a phone call to get
on a phone call to come in to work. But I mean, workers know all this. I mean, they might not know the reason why, but they know it, they're experiencing it, they're living with it all the time. So they see it at first hand.
And Barry, something I also want to ask you is that we're constantly hearing, particularly in the South, Ireland's one of the richest countries. So and this thing of then feeling guilty for complaining or shame because you're not in that sort of your comfortable zone. So people kind of hide even that they're struggling. Why, if there's so much wealth accumulated now, and we hear about there's no longer billionaires, trillionaires now.
Yeah.
How are people still struggling if there's more wealth than ever there was before?
Well, I mean, the thing of it is that higher productivity doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get more wages. And all the time, the costs are rising to live. I mean, the cost of housing, the cost of rents, the cost of food. And I mean, there's a very important and famous graph that shows that the levels of productions on the graph has risen exponentially from the 70s, but wages have in fact flatlined and in some cases dropped. And I mean, there's a clear indication there that workers are obviously producing more profits, but they're clearly not sharing those profits. You know what I mean? Those profits go to shareholders and it goes to the top. And I mean, it goes to the top 5 or 6 people who own 3/4 of the wealth of the world, or 50% of the wealth of the world at the very least.
And we get the crumbs.
We get the crumbs, yeah.
And I always end on this question: what can we actually do about it? All right, give us some hope.
Well, as I said earlier, I mean, this system, this capitalist system, and we will call it the capitalist system, which it is, call it by its correct name. I mean, it's not inevitable. It doesn't mean that it's here forever, and it wasn't handed down to us by nature. You know, it was built by people, and it can be changed by people. It can be changed by us, because that's how change happens. It's humans that create change, not some mysterious element within the skies or whatever. It's human beings that create change. So we need to begin to imagine a different system, where a fairer system, a proper democratic system. I mean, what we really need is proper democracy, as opposed to democracy that's bought and sold long ago and propped up by billions from multinational companies, as in the case of America and increasingly in the case of Ireland. I mean, that's not democracy and it's not fairness, you know what I mean? And I suppose we have to talk about it, and we have to talk to friends. We have to let people know that this is possible. We have to say to them, and we have to get people to understand that a new system is possible. And that new system, as far as I'm concerned, is socialism. I mean, if you go to work, what would be wrong with you going to work and getting the profits of all of the work that you do? What would be wrong with that? What would be wrong with you having a house at a very minimum rent, paid, subsidised by government? What would be wrong with that? Is there anything wrong with that? What would be wrong with subsidised food? Nothing. These are the essentials for life. What would be wrong with that? Like, I mean, let's talk about it. I mean, people can't probably see it now, and people can't imagine it, and they're so caught up, I suppose, in their own lives and so busy trying to make ends meet, they haven't time to think about these things. But if talking like this begins to get people to think, I mean, that's what Socialist Republican Forum means. We could have called it the Republican Forum, but I mean, it's a Socialist Republican Forum. That's what Social Rights Ireland is about. I mean, it's about socialising the wealth that we create, and there's no wealth created without workers. I mean, if you build a multi-billion-pound factory and have nobody in it, it's not going to make any money. Okay, you might say, well, we have AI and all that sort of stuff now, but that's grand. But somebody had to build that AI. Somebody has to do all that. Somebody has to repair it. So, I mean, workers are essential. So that's the kind of thing that we need to start looking at and investigating.
Socialism isn't a dream. It's not a dream.
It's not a dream, and it's certainly not a pipe dream. And I mean, we have examples of it working around the world. I mean, we have it in Cuba. We have it under voracious attack from America for 60 years. We have it trying to build socialism in Venezuela. We have socialism and people's democracy, proper democracy in Kerala in India. You know, we have it. It's there. And we had it in the Soviet Union. So it is there, and it's doable, and it's workable. It's a real thing. It's not, despite all the propaganda from the capitalists and capitalism and imperialism, despite all that propaganda, we know it works, and that's why there's such vehemence against it. It's because it works.
The capitalists will sell us anything,
of course,
except socialism.
Absolutely.
It's the only thing they won't sell. They don't want us to know about it.
No.
And our minds are so colonized and so brainwashed. Like, I think innately being, a colonial country, and we're not post-colonial. I take issue with that term. Anybody who says that Ireland is post-colonial, we certainly are not.
No.
We're living neo-colonialism down south in particular, and still traditional colonialism in the 6 occupied counties. But like, the most tragic thing for me is to see people who still call themselves Irish, but talking like a Brit, or talking like, and I don't mean talking with an accent, thinking like a colonizer, thinking like the oppressor. And we really need to do an awful lot of work to decolonize. I hate that decolonize. It's such a trendy word, but to take look at the system and the cultural infiltration that is saturating the brains of young people, but not just young people my age and
People,
your age,
oh,
Barry.
yeah,
You know, like it's
yeah.
awful. When did this happen? Or I know
But
how it
imagine,
happened.
but
Very
imagine on top of that, that the very system that we have lived under for 200 or 300 years and that governs most of the world in one way or another, imagine that it's not even talked about. It's not even mentioned. I mean, the word capitalism is sort of seen as as I said earlier, a sort of it's almost like a swear word. You wouldn't
bad
use
word.
that word. It's a bad word. I mean, when you start talking about capitalism, there's something wrong with you. When in fact, it's the very system that governs your life every day, every minute of your life, whether you're awake or asleep.
I think it's really important to talk about language and to use the correct language. That's our job as well when we are trying to educate to agitate. And so there's no point beating around the bush when it comes to talking about these words. Listen, I just want to say to people out there, like if you enjoyed this, if you've got questions, we really want to, if you want to take it further and look at how the system works, that the next episode is going to be really important. We're going to look at looking and seeing who are the real rulers then, who are the ones that are hoarding the wealth. But it's really important that people come back and engage and maybe even leave questions on the YouTube channel for the Peadar O'Donnell
Yeah.
Socialist Republican Forum and engage that we're not just talking to ourselves. So please, if you want to get involved as well in this conversation, it's really important to know that your voice matters. Barry, thanks a million. Any last final words, or will we leave it there?
We can leave it at that for now. We can come back again at the other angles
Aye,
on it.
it'd be great to come back. Okay, slán go
Thank
fóill.
you, Slán.